Hello, and welcome to Tech Talk, a show where we talk about anything and everything in the realm of computer technology. I'm your host, James Kodiatis. Today we have a very special episode. We'll be talking about how to custom build a computer for whatever need you could possibly imagine. In this episode, we'll discuss the 3 primary steps necessary to complete this goal. Those include research and part acquisition, building of the computer itself, and software and driver installation. The first step of the process is research and part acquisition. In this stage of the process, you're going to want to determine what you need to use the computer for. Are you using it for computer graphic design? Are you using it to play games? Are you using it to just browse the internet? What you need the computer for is going to largely determine what kind of hardware you select during this process. So once you've decided what your goal performance-wise is and what you're going to be using the computer for, it's time to start researching what parts you're going to get. Now, there are a variety of ways to do it, the best of which I believe to be PCPartPicker.com, which is kind of a meta search engine for all the different sites that sell hardware. So what that does is it facilitates you seeing all of the data present from all of the different sites that sell hardware and being able to find the best prices. Once you've determined what components you want, you just need to order them, and once they arrive, you're ready to start the next part of the process, which is the construction part of the process. So we'll move on to that one now. Okay, now that we've established that we have all the parts that we need and we're ready to start building. So first, let's go over the components that we have. We have a motherboard, a CPU, which is the central processing unit, a PSU, which is the power supply unit. We have RAM, which is random access memory. We have a hard drive or a solid-state drive, which is our storage. We have a video card, and we have a case. You could, in addition to that, you may also have peripheral components, which typically you will have, which include the mouse, the keyboard, an optical drive or burner, and of course the monitor. So at this point, I'm going to take a moment to explore each of these components in a little bit more detail, just so we understand what we're working with. So first up, we have the motherboard. The motherboard is the main circuit board of your computer and is also known as the main board or logic board. It's the biggest silicon-based component in the system. The motherboard is the conduit through which the other components are connected and interact. The next component is the CPU, which stands for Central Processing Unit, and is also commonly referred to simply as the processor. This is essentially the brain of your computer. It processes everything from basic instructions to complex functions. Anytime something needs to be computed, it gets sent to the CPU. Next up is the PSU, or Power Supply Unit. The power supply is a hardware component that supplies power to the computer. It does this by receiving power from an electrical outlet and converting the current from AC, alternating current, to DC, direct current, which is what the computer requires to operate. It also regulates the voltage to an adequate amount, which allows the computer to run smoothly without overheating. The next component is the RAM, or random access memory. RAM is made up of small memory chips that form a memory module. These modules are installed in the RAM slots on the motherboard of your computer. Every time you open a program, it gets loaded from the hard drive into the RAM. This is because reading data from the RAM is much faster than reading data from the hard drive. The next component that we will discuss is data storage, which will typically, and in this case, be a hard disk drive. When you save data or install programs on your computer, the information is typically written to your hard disk. A hard disk is a spindle of magnetic disks, called platters, that record and store information. Because the data is stored magnetically, information recorded to the hard disk remains intact after you turn the computer off. This is an important distinction between the hard disk and RAM. The next component is the video card, or graphics accelerator. A video card can be used to process the graphics portion of the processing load. Because most of today's programs are graphically oriented, the video card can help almost any program run more efficiently. However, the difference in performance is especially noticeable in image editing applications in 3D games. Video cards can speed up both 2D and 3D graphic rendering. Programs such as photo editors and web browsers may benefit from the 2D acceleration, while CAD design programs, the Adobe Creative Suite, and video games will most likely benefit from the card's 3D acceleration. The rest of the components that I haven't discussed thus far include the case, the mouse, the keyboard, and the monitor. These are pretty straightforward. The case is simply a container for everything, and they come in different shapes and sizes. It's pretty straightforward. You can Google it if you want. If you have any other questions about any of the information, a quick Google search will certainly yield tons of results, and you can also find out more about the other things that we've discussed thus far by searching. But now it's time to move on to the building segment of this tutorial, so we will move on to that now. Now that we understand what we're working with, we can begin to actually put the components into the case and build the machine. So typically you'll start by installing the motherboard and the PSU. You'll want to test fit them first to make sure everything fits nice and snug. Then you can start to screw things in and begin installing the other components. Normally you'll install the CPU at this point after you've got those two first components installed. When you're installing the CPU, it's important to apply a thermal compound to the top of the CPU. You'll do this by using a razor blade and taking some thermal compound and putting it right onto the top of the CPU and spreading it with the razor blade, so you get a nice thin layer, and then you mount your cooler on top of that. Now you can either use a cooler that comes with it, or you can go and buy an aftermarket one if you're looking to overclock. If you're just doing a basic build, then you can just use the cooler that comes with the CPU. It'll be fine. Once you've installed the CPU, you're going to want to install the RAM and the RAM slots. That's very straightforward. You simply pop it into the slot and push down, and you'll feel it click into place. The video card, there's a PCIe slot on the motherboard. You can just pop it right into there. You're going to have to unscrew one of the expansion slot ports, the bracket on the case itself, to free up the space in the back of most cases to make space for it. Once you've installed all of those components, you're pretty much ready to start doing the wiring from the PSU itself, which entails, you just look inside the motherboard's manual and it tells you pretty much everything you need to know in terms of wiring. It'll tell you exactly how to do the jumpers. The jumpers are the most tedious of the entire process, where you have to put down, use the small little 2-pin connectors in some cases, and just be very careful. That's really the hardest part of the entire thing. As long as you can follow instructions, it's really pretty simple to put everything together. Once you've made sure that everything is connected and you are confident that you've checked everything twice, you can start to boot the PC for the first time. So you're just going to connect it to the wall, plug in your mouse, keyboard, monitor, etc., and boot the PC for the first time. So we will move on to the software and drivers section of the tutorial. The third and final step of the tutorial is the installation of an operating system and the installation of the drivers once the operating system has been successfully installed. So the first thing you're going to want to do is select an operating system. Right now I would recommend Windows 7, as it is contemporary enough to be very good, yet also not so new that it's buggy, which I've heard a lot about Windows 8, that in its current incarnation it's very buggy. So you will proceed to install the operating system via either a CD-ROM, DVD-ROM, or a bootable flash drive. Just follow the on-screen instructions and you will have the operating system installed in no time. Once the operating system has been successfully installed, you are going to need to install the drivers. Now, typically the manufacturers of the hardware that you purchase will provide you with a disk to install these drivers. So you can go ahead and install the drivers that they give you. What I would recommend you do is actually use only the motherboard drivers from the actual disk. Install them, get your internet working. Once you have the internet driver installed, the one for the NIC in the back, you are going to use the internet to then get the most up-to-date versions of the drivers for all of the other components, including the motherboard. That way you can be assured that you have the most up-to-date drivers and you will experience far less bugginess and a lot more stable hardware performance. Once you've finished that, you can update Windows via Windows Update and start installing the software that you're going to need to use for the computer, and then you're pretty much finished and you'll be able to use your brand new machine for whatever purpose you had designed it to fulfill, and hopefully that will serve you well as your trusty computer. So this concludes our tutorial for building a PC. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I encourage you to tune in next time. See you then.